to call the meeting to order at 6:33. Joe, can you make an explanation of the voting change we're going to make tonight?
Based on my review of the bylaws, I'm going to be requesting advising the board to make a record of the voice votes and who's making the votes so that we can ensure compliance with the bylaw requirement that the voting officers of those representing municipalities with greater than 15% contributions to the library. I think it's important that we still hear the votes of those members that are not the voting members, so we can make a record of those as well. But just ensure compliance that we guarantee that the voting officers are the ones that we have the sufficient numbers from.
Are those other members getting retroactively deprived of their voting rights?
It's not we are applying the bylaws according to how they're written up. So we're not changing anything in the past, just moving forward. We're asking to make sure we have a record, just in case to support any of the votes we make in the record.
So you're saying any votes from a voice vote? I mean,
Yes.
that means vote.
Yeah, so we'll voice vote everything tonight.
Okay.
And make sure that we have a record of who is voting which way for each person.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
And actually, you mean roll call vote?
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Then we're going to move on to consent agenda. First up, approval of the minutes from the March meeting. Does anyone have any updates or comments? Oh yes, Kat just wanted to make sure people know we are on video tonight, so if you're uncomfortable not being on tape, I recommend that you be towards the back of the room. The only thing I caught, we have a misspelled Mr. Leeson's name. It's misspelled under update bylaw 5. The only thing that I caught is right there. We've got less than not Leeson. Okay.
But then also the stone and the weed thing isn't on here at all. I mean, it's minor, but it's not on there.
I thought brief discussion about
Leaving the stones up.
Oh, sure.
Here it is, short discussion about weeds and landscaping rocks around the building.
Yeah, on the back.
Well, there was anything else? Okay, we're gonna move to treasurer's report. John, anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so.
Any questions for John on the treasurer's report?
I have an overall question.
Yes, Vicki?
It said the year-to-date for Lower Milford, it's still 0. Is there any update on that?
There is not any update on that.
No update.
I did send a request asking them to reconsider the decision not to send their contribution for the first quarter, and I have not had any response.
No response at all?
None.
Any other questions on the treasurer's report? Okay, we're gonna move to librarian's report for April. Lynette, anything you'd like to add?
Yes. I just want to recognize that this week is National Volunteer Appreciation Week. And not only do we appreciate the volunteers that help us with our library services, shelving books, repairing books, and so forth, but all of our board members are volunteers as well. So thank you so much for your service to the library and to the community. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the cookies.
You're welcome. Also, next week is National Library Week, and one of our staff, Marilla Payne, who is one of our children's librarians, she has worked with Corey Robbins at the Southern Lehigh Middle School to create a video advertising some of our newest items, specifically geared to teens. And so you will see that on social media next week. So take a look at our website and Facebook for that video. She did a great job in that. She's also going to reach out to the intermediate school as well to see if that librarian would also like to share that video with her students. So, and then one additional item that I received the day after I submitted my report. Our Reference and Technology Services librarian, Allison, has resigned. And so we are going to need to hire a replacement there in the next few weeks.
Any questions on the librarian report?
Always sad to lose a team member.
Yes, it
Also,
is.
the rain report.
I would just like to say that I went to that Bon Appetit, with the Friends on your report, and it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. So thank you for the Friends for putting that on.
Okay, now that we've covered everything, motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Kate, second. Okay, we're gonna vote in order. Bruce?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Sandy's a yes. Kathy?
Yes.
Yes. Kathy, yes. Vicky? Yes. Okay, motion passes. Okay, community residents' comments. We do have our rules that were up front. We are going to take comment from anyone who would like to speak for up to 3 minutes. Remember that you should address the board, not the audience. Kat explained she's going to use some motions to make sure people know where they're at on time, so I don't have to interrupt you.
So we're going to go by speech and debate rules tonight. So in speech debate tournaments, you hold up a 1 for 1 minute left, a half for 30 seconds, and a fist at a time. Instead of interrupting you while you're speaking, we're going to try that. But if it gets too confusing for everybody, we'll go back to the old, okay, we need the next person now. Does that make sense?
Give him a hug.
And can everybody see me if I do this? Okay.
Lynette?
Priscilla De Leon.
Yes, hi. I just would like to say and go on record that I'm a councilwoman in Lower Saucon Township, and I voted no to the proposal that's in front of you, and I would just like your record to reflect that. And I want to thank all of you. As no disrespect to any of you. You have a fine library here, and I don't envy your position tonight. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Lynn McHale.
That's me. Hi, I'm Lynn Hill. I sent a letter in to the board. I don't think it was everybody here, but it was for whoever was on your website. And I'll just reiterate a little bit of what I said in my letter. Hellertown and Lower Saucon, as you know, have been on the outs lately. And originally, when they started the library in Hellertown, it was residents of Lower Saucon and Hellertown Borough working together to form this library and to fund it and everything. And I don't know of any resident of our township who has said they don't want to use Hellertown anymore. I don't know of anyone personally who has said they would prefer this library. Our council has said that, you know, they could fund this library, we could have home memberships here and still use Hellertown, but that seems highly unethical because everybody would still be using Hellertown, so your library would get the funds, but Hellertown would do the work and perform the services. And to me, that's just not ethical. It's just not, so I don't think it would be proper for this agreement that LST has offered to be accepted. I also think that if it is accepted and Hellertown chooses, Lower Saucon Township chooses to fund this library and not fund Hellertown, you know, that could be the demise for a community library that's within walking distance of our schools. The kids, you know, all socialize there and so on. And it would be a shame to see the Hellertown Library suffer financial harm. I also am very offended that our council has said they want to send $250,000 of our COVID relief money to fund this library. And I also think that's highly unethical and reprehensible. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cindy McKellen.
Cindy McCowan. I also agree with the people who've spoken before me that we should not be switching our home library from Hellertown to Southern Lehigh. Not that there's any issue with Southern Lehigh Library, but it has been the library that our students are able to access more readily than coming here. I also wanted to speak because at one of our council meetings, some of the council members indicated that the last time people came and spoke, there were only 7 people that spoke, and it indicated to them a lack of interest in supporting the Hellertown Library, which I feel is totally wrong. Not everybody was aware that we could even come here and be heard. So I thank you for allowing us to come and hear what we have to say, and we hope that you will not approve the proposal that's in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob McKellen?
Yeah, I was gonna say almost all the same stuff that's been said, and again, I wanna make sure I'm on the record as supporting Hal. I have grandkids that live in Hellertown, and they go to the programs there. Without Lower Saucon Township's money, I don't know how long that library could last. It would be like if Upper Saucon all of a sudden decided they were gonna support Hal, how would the Southern Lehigh Library feel about that? That's really what I just wanted to get out there.
Thank you. Andrea Witchen?
That's me. I've pretty much put everything that I meant to say in writing. I just have 3 small additional points I'd like to make. I think you all have received copies of the open letter that I wrote. First of all, there is no reason to make this decision now. There is no date coming up that requires you to make a decision. You are being bullied into doing this by an imaginary date created by the Lower Saucon Township Council. There is absolutely no reason why you should have to make a decision by May the 4th. And you should also not be bullied into making a decision which could have a 10-year impact on your township. That is simply the work of bullies, and it's what we have watched happening in our township for the last 2 years. And thirdly, and this somewhat reiterates what was said before, but I have been to every single township meeting since July of 2020, and the ones that I wasn't at, I have videotaped. And in that time, I do not recall a single person from the community standing at the lectern and announcing that they were in support of leaving Hal and joining Southern Lehigh Public Library. Not one. The only person who speaks on the council in support of our staying with Hal is Mrs. De Leon. The only people who speak against it are the 4 members, other members who sit on our council. So while they might want to poo-poo how many people show up at your meeting, I know that there are, literally by my count, thousands of members of Lower Saucon who do not support this arrangement. Thank you.
Laura Ray?
Yes, so I want to also just make sure I'm on record so that it's not just 6 members and it's not 60 members and it's not even 600 members. There's thousands of people that want to use the Howe Library in Hellertown. So I also want to reiterate some of the things that Andrea was saying about the bullying. And we have that going on in our township on our boards. And you should be very cautious because one thing they were looking at long ago, which I found out through the right to know request that I did, was interest in who's on your board, when your appointments are up, when looking at your bylaws, all that stuff. They were snooping around that long ago. They would like nothing better than to get control of your board so that they can run things how they want to run things. And it's not necessarily in the best interest of community members. it's in whatever their intent is. So, just wanted to say that. That's it.
Thank you. Victoria, and I'm sorry, your last name is, I'm gonna butcher it.
Hi, I'm just standing because I'm all the way at the end. I'm Victoria Optoff Cordaro. I just want to first say thank you for allowing the community to come here tonight. I've been here at other meetings and I know you rearranged your room to accommodate what you perceive to be a full house, which is. And so I want to say that I've watched you diligently deliberate many times over this issue and spend the majority of your meetings discussing Lower Saucon Township. Number one, I want to apologize if I can. I can't really apologize on behalf of Lower Saucon Council, but I'm sorry that you were placed in the middle of a situation between Hellertown and Lower Saucon. I will reiterate that in my own discussions with many community members, as well as family members and different people in the community, the desire that I have seen is a desire to reunite the Lower Saucon and Hellertown community as Saucon Valley, which has always been called Saucon Valley, well before I was born, and I would assume well after I'm gone. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and change things, I would request that this board really consider keeping your community, the beautiful community that it is, and allowing Saucon Valley to prosper as a Saucon Valley community. By cutting the Saucon Valley community in half or 2/3, whatever you want to look at it, it will inevitably destroy the Hellertown area library and the community that it creates, not just for books and library services, but for the Saucon Valley as a whole. And I don't think it will help our region. So I do request that you deny the request from Lower Saucon Township. Consider whatever other things that you may consider. I will also reiterate that there is an election this November, and many of our constituents have indicated that they are really hopeful that our new township council will bring forth our Saucon Valley community. So I think it's also detrimental to you to have some of the exit clauses that were placed in this in such an onerous way. So again, I appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you. Megan?
Loman Gino. First off, I want to thank you for allowing us to speak here tonight. Lower Saucon has put you in a position that you should not be in. And from what I've heard from other people, there may be pressure coming from outside areas, including your own councils or the school district or other avenues that are coming in to play. You're put in a position that is impossible. However, to reiterate what Ms. Witcham said previously, there is a lot of bullying happening, and I attended the January meeting here this year, and I remember it being said, not verbatim, but along the lines of, we accepted $50,000 with no strings attached, and this is where it has gotten you. The bullying will not stop just because an offer is chosen to be accepted. They have shown through every single meeting that I've attended and my community members have attended at Lower Saucon Township Council that our opinions have not mattered yet. So thank you again for listening to our opinions, but also that this was never about the money, because apparently the money exists and they're offering it to you. This is not about the money. This is about something bigger than all of us in this room. I don't have to explain to you the importance of the libraries, the location of our library, or the relationships of the library. You already know well about the access card. Should relationships be restored, there is possibilities that we can still enjoy your library while funding fully Hellertown with the money that we have that exists. I think it's kind of ironic that the only person from our current board who's here is Ms. De Leon, and that one. Oh, okay, I don't know who that is. There you go. So 2 people from our board, but a handful of other people who are not here and previously, as stated in January, had not come to various meetings and shown interest other than being interested. In real estate, which I do have a background in, it's all about negotiations. Think about what it is that you're looking for, think about what it is that they're looking for. Does this timeline warrant the need to rush things? Or is there time to space it out? And that is all I have.
Thank you.
Almost had that.
I know, I got nervous, I kind of missed.
Kathy, for the minutes, there were 20 Lower Saucon Township residents present, 1 Upper Saucon Township representative, and 26 people in the audience.
Actually, can I speak up?
I'm okay with that. Can we,
I will need to note it
Diane,
on here.
Diane
so-
Hollowell. I live right down the road, and I can't believe how long it took me to get here. I can't imagine somebody who lives out in Wassergasse and Lower Saucon driving their kids all the way here. Like, that just boggled my mind. And I was offended at one of our council meetings where they said, they have more books here. I am a high school librarian, and libraries are more than books. I ran miniature golf in my library today. Lower Saucon, Hal has, there's craft nights next week. There's programs for seniors to come and do their taxes. There's so much they offer there, and I can't even comprehend, if we don't fund that, I don't see that existing in a few years. Like, they cannot run that stuff. So please, please, let's keep Hal.
Thank you.
Robin Sosha, can you please tell me how many emails you got from Lower Saucon Township
we'll
residents
cover
concerning
that
this?
once all of the public comment is done.
Okay.
Is that it? Your name, please?
Kathy Mitchell McGovern.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was on the board for Hellertown Area Library for many years. I happened to be in medicine. The only reason why I left was because of COVID. I enjoyed it, and when I look at your treasurer's report, ours is very similar. It's the same income coming in from all libraries. When we did the treasurer's report, you looked at your memberships. And Lower Saucon Township and Hellertown had equal memberships. You had your Lower Saucon side and your Hellertown side, and they were equal memberships. So I'd like you to consider that as well. My biggest fear is we're gonna lose our library, period. That's my biggest fear. But I just want you to know that both sides were equal for the attendance and membership in the library. It's very well utilized by both sides. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience like to speak?
David Willard. I had said I wouldn't speak because I've communicated in writing to all of you as I have to our council members. The key points simply were, there's no reason this offer couldn't be made to Hal. They would accept it in a minute. A respected member of our community who was involved in mediating in the early stages offered to do that at our last council meeting. As far as I know, the council showed no interest in that. So again, I just cannot understand how we got to this point. I cannot understand why this offer couldn't be made to Hal.
Do we have any other community members who'd like to speak?
I would just like to request that the proposal be read into the minutes, as nobody in Lower Saucon has actually seen the proposal. It hasn't been posted, it hasn't been publicized, so I'd like it read into the minutes.
Our solicitor will give an overview of
I'll
that.
talk about some of the major points.
You're not gonna read it into the info?
I was not, it's quite lengthy, so I wasn't gonna read every.
That's all right, they read the minutes.
It's not that long.
Well, none of us have seen it.
I've seen it, it's not that long.
It's on my councilwoman.
It's a public document,
Yeah.
isn't it?
No, it's not a public, we have not seen it.
Well,
I'm gonna ask Mr. Leeson to read that when we get there.
we'll make it a
Okay.
public document.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, someone else had asked about letters. I have a pack here that was 51. I know that you're at 63, correct?
I'm at, hang on, because the last arrived just a minute or two ago. 68 plus one I haven't opened yet in my email.
Okay, so I know one of those was from a Upper Saucon Township resident, and the balance were from Hellertown residents and Lower Saucon Township residents. Kat Moyer very kindly made a common themes list for us, because we don't have all of the time, but we'll give this copy to Kathy to put with the minutes. Sorry. Common themes that people want to support Hal and want to use, quote unquote, their library, that they feel it's a bad deal for the Southern Lehigh Public Library and their current funding partners. Don't feel pressured to take a deal after a year of dragging feet by the Lower Saucon Township. Don't destroy our community. Beware, the penalty clause is a red flag, why is it needed? And Lower Saucon Township Council may not be familiar with all the basic state programs and laws such as SLPL rules and regulations. So those were the main topics, many of which have been reiterated today. Let me give this back. Thank you, Pat. And we're gonna move on to regular agenda items. First up under old business is the strategic plan update. Bruce and Kathy.
You want me to talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm.
Kathy,
Can
oh, Kathy.
I?
Well, go ahead.
Okay. I didn't want both of us to try to talk at the same time. Kathy and I we're finally getting some things done on the strategic plan. I was kind of out of commission for a month or so, we met a couple of weeks ago and started working on it. The first thing that we had discussed was one of the sorely needed items in the library is somebody in a position of a fund development manager. We need somebody to, not just board members and stuff and staff, to go out in the community and help us raise funds, and write grants and do stuff like that. So we put together a whole definition, responsibilities and stuff, and we're finalizing the editing on that, and I'll send that out to the board so you got that information. Some other things that we've included in the overall strategic plan work is to talk about succession planning, which is something we don't have right now, and we sort of need to do that. We had penciled in tax referendum. I don't know where we are on that because I wasn't here last month. Recruiting additional volunteers, and special funding sources. In addition, that would probably come underneath this fund development manager, but we're not sure if we should leave that as a separate entity. Maintenance of the physical plant. Again, we've got a physical plant policy, but we need to kind of narrow that down a little bit. And additional staff, and where do we go with that? So we're making some progress. This has been a long-term project that we actually had a consulting company come in and help us kind of narrow it down. We asked a lot of questions, and now we're going through everything that we've got to say, okay, where does that fit in this line? So hopefully by next month we'll have some more activity on it. So.
Kathy, anything to add?
No, that's covered.
Any questions from the board? Okay, we're gonna move on to Lower Saucon Township status. Joe, before you read the proposal for minutes, can you give an overview about how the board should be approaching this review, conversation, and decision making?
Certainly. I had requested to Candy that I just cover a few points to help guide some of the deliberation over the proposal from Lower Saucon Township. I specifically looked at the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office provides guidance for charitable organizations as to fiduciary duties for charitable organizations. Two of the fiduciary duties that they outline, I'm going to cover just to help guide the discussion. The first being the financial sustainability of the organization, in this case the library, and that's ensuring and maintaining funds for the future and present charitable purpose of the organization, and maintaining funds that adequately cover expenses. The second one is the quality of services, and that's ensuring adequate services are provided to municipalities presently served by the library and may be served in the future. The OCL also provides guidance, and for anyone who doesn't know, OCL is the state librarian's office, the Office of Commonwealth Libraries. And some of the language I took directly from some of their guidelines is regularly working to ensure the library has sufficient operating and reserve funds, managing expenditures in good faith, and setting strategic goals and overseeing a budget that is in alignment with these goals. And then I think some of the language that I thought was important, was helpful, and also I thought I wanted to point out was the OCL specifically stated raising funds to continue toward the board's vision of an ideal community library in the context of the accompanying operating costs, legal costs, and other costs affiliated with the risks of any contract or venture. So I would just advise the board during the deliberations to try to keep these factors in mind as part of the fiduciary duties as representing the board. That being said, do you want me to read the...
Does anyone have any questions on Joe's comments before we do this? Okay, yes, please.
So this is the letter that I received from the solicitor for Lower Saucon Township, and that is Attorney Treadwell. It's addressed to me, and it starts as, at an advertised special council meeting held on April 4th, 2023, the Lower Saucon Township Council voted to decline the limited library services proposal contained in your correspondence, being the library's correspondence, dated February 24, 2023, and to present to the Southern Lehigh Public Library Board and its current financial partners the following counterproposal, subject to the final approval of the appropriate documents agreements. Number 1, Lower Saucon Township proposes that Lower Saucon Township, the Southern Lehigh Public Library, and the library's current financial partners enter into a partnership/joint venture arrangement pursuant to the provisions of the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Act and/or the PA Library Code that would provide full home library services for all residents of the cooperating municipalities. Number 2, Lower Saucon Township proposes to contribute/donate an initial $250,000, a one-time payment, to the partnership arrangement for distribution to Southern Lehigh Public Library in a timely and practical manner agreed to by the partners. After the commencement of full home library services for residents of Lower Saucon Township. Lower Saucon Township proposes that full home library service for Lower Saucon Township residents commence on or before June 1st, 2023. Lower Saucon Township proposes to contribute/donate $75,000 per year starting in 2024 toward the costs of operating Southern Lehigh Public Library for a 10-year period. These contributions/donations and those of the existing financial partners will be memorialized in the appropriate written agreement to be executed by all partners. Number 4, Southern Lehigh Public Library will provide full home library services equal to the services provided to the residents of the current financial partners to Lower Saucon Township residents commencing on June 1st, 2023, and continuing for the 10-year period referenced above. This includes, but is not limited to, providing Lower Saucon Township residents with statewide library card, Access PA, privileges and services. Number 5, starting in 2024, Lower Saucon Township will be authorized to appoint board members to the Southern Lehigh Public Library Board in a manner proportional to the total amount of funding provided by Lower Saucon Township, as compared to the total amount of funding provided for Southern Lehigh Public Library operations from all municipal sources during that time period. Number 6, Lower Saucon Township proposes that the written funding agreement contain financial penalties agreed upon by all parties to that agreement that will be enforced and collected should any party unilaterally terminate or withdraw from the partnership/joint venture prior to the expiration of the 10-year term. The purpose of this provision is to ensure continuity in funding for Southern Lehigh Public Library and continuity in library services for the funding partners. Number 7, Lower Saucon Township is not opposed to including other libraries and municipalities, providing the other funding partners' consent in the partnership/joint venture arrangements to ensure that as many citizens as possible have equal access to exemplary and sustainable library services. That's the last of the 7 conditions. This is the final paragraph. Lower Saucon Township requests the courtesy of a response to this proposal from Southern Lehigh Public Library by May 4th, 2023. In the event that a response is not received by that date, this proposal shall be deemed to have been rejected, and Lower Saucon Township will continue to seek alternative arrangements for the provision of home library services for its residents. That's the end.
Just to note that they also copied all of our funding partners to the letter.
So that's the proposal that we have today. I know that you had mentioned, Joe, that Mr. Treadwell had called you last week and left a message. Have we heard anything else from him?
No, I haven't heard anything else.
Okay, so what we have to discuss is what we have before us. As supplementary documentation, I worked with John as part of the finance committee to try and put together some numbers. The first page is just an estimate of per capita based off of our current arrangement. I know that there were some copies in the back, they may be gone by now, but the Lower Saucon Township contribution when averaged out over the 10 years and 7 months that they have requested would be around $95,000. That would be per capita of $8.59 per person on average. Again, we don't do per capita, that's not how we factor our dollars, it's just a conversation each year. That's in comparison to Upper Saucon Township per capita of $11.97, a Creepersburg per capita of $9.58, and a Lower Milford per capita of $5.26. And our school district currently pays an additional $3.08 for every resident. You also have a draft budget where we have done our best due diligence to put together numbers about what this would look like. This is put together based off of an understanding that they would become part of our direct services area, so that we would pull in the state aid, we would pull in district aid to support LCLC in the Allentown district. And that goes along with the requirements of staffing and collections. Based off of that review, we would go from our current budget gap of about $26,000 to a budget gap of around $61,000. Again, these are preliminary numbers based off of Finance Committee review and feedback from Lynette upon review of our current budget. So that's what we have as part of the discussion point. So for now, why don't we open discussion on the proposal?
From my reading of the proposal, it sounds like they want us to make arrangements with all of our funding partners at the same time.
It is mentioned, I think in one of the first requirements, that they would like all of the other parties to be included in the agreement. That's a detail we'd have to work out.
And they realize that we can't get that permission by May 4th in 2 weeks.
They asked for a response. They didn't necessarily ask that we would have it arranged.
I think the understanding is that I would reach out to Attorney Treadwell and we would work out the details based on the outcome of the meeting today.
This dog won't hunt. We're wasting our time talking about it.
Are there any other questions?
Is it even possible to get Access PA by June 1st?
It's our understanding, and Mark and I have talked about this, I don't think so. And that's not something we're trying to withdraw. My understanding is the board's not trying to keep that off the table. If we can provide it, we'd love to provide it.
Yeah, of course.
And I think if we were to work out an agreement, I would discuss with Treadwell, Attorney Treadwell, possibly working in the language that we would provide it if we were capable of. And that would be a determination, I think, that would probably more come from the state rather than the board here.
That's a good question about where it would come from. As we've said before, Office of Commonwealth Libraries is not big on giving legal advice. So much stuff is, when we ask, they say you have to talk to your own lawyer. So I'm not so sure what kind of advice we would get from them. And I did actually reach out yesterday, hoping against all hope that maybe they'd throw me a bone or refer me to some past guidance from either the Office of Commonwealth Libraries or Department of Education, and I have not received a response. I think it's something that ultimately would have to be litigated, and I don't know who would want to volunteer to be the one to litigate.
But to be clear, it's not Hellertown Public Library or Southern Lehigh Public Library that is withholding Access PA access to any resident. It's just the rules of the state program?
Our interpretation, my interpretation in particular, now, I always have to stress, I'm not a lawyer, I don't wanna pretend to be something I'm not. But my job, my position, which is written into the Pennsylvania Code, is to provide professional library knowledge to the libraries, including modern library service, administration, library governance. So I'm the first, my person in my position is the first line of defense when libraries have questions about interpretations of the statutes and regulations and guidelines. And in my 11 years of working with these statutes, regulations, and guidelines and seeing how they've been applied across the state, my opinion is that, let me step back here, that I think, it appears that Lower Saucon's interpretation is that if you give money to a library, you are therefore become a supporting municipality, therefore can make these requests about being part of Access PA, about calling this library your home library. In my opinion, there are many spots in different regulations and statutes come together to say that the concept of a supporting municipality is inextricably linked to being a part of a state-approved library service area. So that is my interpretation, and so therefore they are not part of anybody's state-approved service area, so therefore they are not eligible for Access PA privileges.
And the service area is something they request once a year in the fall, so you can't request
Correct, it has to be an official request, and as we've stated before, in this particular situation, since it crosses district lines, never mind county lines, a change in the service area boundaries would require both Office of Commonwealth Libraries and the Governor's Advisory Council approval.
But to be fair, Mark, I think we've discussed that if the partners decided that they wanted to do this and we went to OCL and the Governor's Council, we don't necessarily believe they would say no, as long as we had worked out all of the details.
Yes, I believe we can get it done.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Chris?
Going over your numbers that you worked out,
Yep.
859 ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Write that down. Upper Saucon contributes 1197, Coopersburg 958, and Lower Milford Township 576, 526. Can't even leave it all in. Why do they think I mean, if I was Upper Saucon, I'd be a little posed about the fact that they think they're gonna come sneaking in the back door and pay less for it and be the winners on this. So I just, did they even think about this when they put this in together? Did they just slap some numbers on the wall? And I'm gonna vote for number 2.
I don't think we know the answer to that question of how the number was.
I wasn't looking for an answer.
It's been obvious to me that we have 4 funding municipalities now, plus this proposed hostile takeover for number 5. And having been a school board member for 12 years, I kind of know how this goes. The library shows up, the intermediate unit shows up, the, the VOTEC shows up, the community college shows up. Here's our budget request. You got a guy in that board. Is it okay? Yeah, good, we're voting for it. They don't go deeper than that because you got a lot of your own fish in the frying pan. Each one of these local governments has a lot of things to do. Now, you wave $250,000 in front of somebody who's worried about replacing some of his road maintenance equipment, and they stop thinking. They say, oh, look at that, $250,000. We're gonna threaten those idiots on the library board unless they take the $250,000. I don't like that. And I wish no one would be taken in by it.
Okay.
I'd like to make one other comment. I'm going back to a March 20th letter from Link Treadwell. The last line of the second paragraph says, and this was a letter to Joe, if Southern Lehigh Public Library is not interested, then please ask your client to just say that so that Lower Saucon Township can pursue other options.
That is an option that we could choose to
Yeah.
go to today.
And I think that we ought to at least consider that. I mean, he's opened the door to say, if you're not interested, let's all move on our own separate ways and there we go.
So we have today's proposal to review. We have two options. We could say yes to proposal. We could say no, but we'd like to negotiate a different deal. We could say no, we're not interested at all. We could also think creatively around how we find a way to make sure that everybody has library services, that everybody feels like they're getting value for their library service dollars, and to try and keep a community united. So one idea that I have had is around the idea of potentially a cooperative opportunity between the Hellertown Area Library and the Southern Lehigh Public Library, where we could join forces, build a cooperative system where the funding would all go into one hat, and we would basically be two branches of a similar system. That's an idea that I have. That's an idea that we have floated tentatively to Hellertown. They said that would be something that they would be willing to discuss with their board if it's something that we would like to discuss. So I'd like to throw that as an idea as well as another way to think through this. Again, that's goes back to, I think it's point 5, no, it's point 7, that they were not opposed to including other libraries and municipalities if we wanted to pursue that. And I think that's something we should think about. Thinking about our fiduciary responsibility to the library, I think that what we've seen in the strategic planning is that it is really hard to be a small library, and trying to find ways to stretch funding can be very difficult. And not to say that it would work, but I think we could work cooperatively with Hellertown to see, is there a possibility that we could be stronger together and make better use of funds for all communities? So that's another option.
Or would that option include Lower Saucon Township?
Yes.
It would. Well, they apparently have
That's
lots
a
of money.
bigger mistake than what we are now.
You know, one of the weaknesses of that is it amplifies a problem that's been a problem with this library for 60 years, which is we rely on cooperation among 4 local governments that don't like each other. Lower Milford, Coopersburg, Upper Saucon, and the school board. I seen each of them get at the other's throat at one time or another. And we have been trying to pour oil on the water to get them to say, okay, yeah, we'll pay for the library, instead of, you know, withholding library money in spite because they're mad at so-and-so. And this would add to that mix. And probably not in a good way. Therefore, I can't imagine it working unless this thing had independent taxing authority, which would get pretty complicated crossing county lines, because the 2 counties run on completely different operating systems for levying property taxes.
I like Cammie's idea in that I think it would help with Lower Saucon and Hellertown. I really, really morally feel that we should not be taking their money from Hellertown and Lower Saucon. But we have a fiduciary responsibility, and we want everyone to have library services. So I think it's something worth pursuing. I don't like this Treadwell's plan at all. We lose out on it financially. And that clause about the give back if one of us goes off early, man, talk about bullying right there.
I just have a question, isn't the 10-year, isn't that the normal term of?
A direct service, sorry,
Right.
yes, Vicki, that's a normal term.
So that's
for-
not anything abnormal?
No.
Well-
It's the money for it.
It's a 10-year commitment, I believe, when you join a direct service area, it's the minimum term, correct, Mark?
Correct.
It's the
But-
penalty that he's proposing
Yes.
that's
I
unusual.
understand, I just
Yeah.
wanna say that 10 years is
Oh, yeah, 10 years is
typical.
fine.
Yeah.
And it wasn't written into the proposal, but at their meeting, they proposed a 5-year penalty of $75,000 per year, so that's $350,000 if a party withdraws. It wasn't in their, it's not in the proposal, but it was in their meeting minutes, or the meeting that I met,
Well, it says in the voted resolution. Would be agreed upon all
Yeah.
parties.
I mean, I think that there's justification for penalty to an extent. It's not necessarily a penalty, but just an ability for the library to get back on its feet. If we would go forward with all of those options, Lynette's gonna have to add staff. We might think about building renovations. Those things come at a cost to the library. The last thing I wanna do is see any funding partner leave and we have to let staff go. We also, with our unemployment, the library had an option about how we pay that. And I'm of the understanding that instead of paying like those insurance premiums, we pay the unemployment out of our own pockets if somebody would be let go. So it's just something to keep in mind, and a reasonable penalty would help cover those costs. I mean, it sounds like that's up for negotiation, what that penalty would be. But obviously, we do not have the financial strength to pay a penalty.
I gotta say this, his whole proposal stinks. I don't think they thought it out. I think they made up some numbers. The numbers per head here don't match up. Why don't we just go back to them and say, either try again, or let's quit playing and go make nice with Howard County Library and get rid of this. I'm so sick of this.
I would offer a variant of that. This board a couple months ago voted 3-2 to give a proposal to Lower Saucon Township. One of the crummiest votes I've ever made on a board my whole life was being on the yes side of that. So I apologize to you guys here, I was a deciding yes vote. And, you know, we voted to jump into the tar pit, and this is the tar. And so, my feeling is, we made the mistake of making you an offer in good faith. You snubbed it. That's it.
Are there any other questions? Oh, there's one. Concerns people would like to talk about?
I do want to underscore the financial part of it, and that is that we would be, instead of being underwater 25,997, we'd be underwater 61,515. I don't think that's a very good fiduciary to take this offer.
Yeah, if it was going to be a yes, it would have to be a yes, but significant negotiation in my thoughts.
Can I ask, where did you get this contribution? I'm trying to do the math here for the proposed $94,488.
So that's the $1 million, that's the 250
Right.
per year, divided by 10 years and 7 months, because they
10
want
years and 7
services
months, okay.
starting
In July.
on June 1st. So
Okay.
that's how I got to
All right,
94.
that's what
If it- Yeah, if we did 10 years, then we'd just be a flat 100.
Right,
So
100.
I was trying to get it as exact as I could based off of.
Which, going back a couple months, I wasn't on the board then, but I was following, they were proposing, I mean, it wasn't in letter, but they had proposed 10,000 a month. And then we countered to 3750 for temporary, right?
I should point out that that was a discussion I had with Attorney Treadwell, that hadn't been formalized and that hadn't been discussed with the
But
board quite yet.
he mentioned,
He mentioned that number,
Okay.
that's correct.
so that would be 120 a year,
It's
so.
closer. I guess it's closer, yeah.
Well, I think that we worked some numbers earlier and I wrote it down, the number of $132,885 a year is what we were gonna need to contribute if we contributed anything.
And we've finessed those numbers a
Well, I
little
know
bit, yeah.
we've finessed a lot of numbers, and so have they. So I'm not, there's no factual stuff here. But I'm insulted with this proposal. They didn't think it through. I think the that pulled that $250,000 out of their ARP funds because they don't know where else to spend it. And it's easy money for them, it's not costing them anything. But,
Bruce, I think they know exactly what they're doing.
Uh-huh.
They're getting great joy from annoying us and annoying Lower Saucon people. I mean,
I had another question for Mark. With our Lehigh Carbon Library Cooperative Agreement prohibiting us from sharing outside resources with unserved areas, and this proposal, which is ridiculous, not starting until 2024, not officially entering our service area until 2024, but they want full services by June 1st. We still wouldn't be able to offer them full services because of our LCLC agreement?
The LCLC agreement is based on what I said, the interpretation, general interpretation of the code is that an unserved area, not part of any official.
That's another thing that we're not able to offer full services.
I do not think Southern Lehigh has the authority to offer other people's services to them. And all I can do, like I said, I'm without paying for a lawyer, those libraries are looking to me for advice, and all I can give them is that they're not obligated to serve those patrons.
So we're prohibited by the state and by OCL from offering full services, whether we wanted to, by June 1st. Is Lower Saucon Township still in litigation with OCL?
Yes. Yes.
So
You can just ask
Good.
us.
is OCL likely to make any kind of decision until that's resolved?
It takes a while for them to come out with decisions in the courts, so I wouldn't
It's been
expect them
kicked up to
to.
federal court now.
Federal court's a little bit faster, but I still wouldn't expect it to quickly.
Yeah, so that's gonna be another year or so?
It depends on the status. I think they had filed motions, and so the motions still have to be heard, and then you go through discovery. So it depends on what status they are in the litigation, how quickly they get through it. I'm not that intimately involved, so I couldn't tell you an exact timeline. Some cases a year, some cases, depending on the judge, can take a couple of years.
So OCL is probably not likely to make any kind of decision on whether or not to, we can.
I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion. I'm gonna make a motion that we set up an ad hoc committee to explore a cooperative agreement that includes the Hellertown Area Library, to include 2 SLPL board members, plus Lynette and Mark for assistance. Set up an ad hoc committee to explore a cooperative opportunity with Hal, to include 2 SLPL board members, Lynette and Mark. Do I have a second?
Are you proposing that we work directly with Hal and not with any other municipalities?
I think we have to build a committee to see if it's possible. Until we would look at numbers closely, there's no way that we would know if it was a good decision or a bad decision for either party. And I think that we would have to have those numbers to be able to have informed conversations with them. We're not taking public comment right now, thank you. Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Conversation on the motion.
I'd like to know Lynette's opinion of this.
Lynette, you do not have to give your opinion.
All right,
Lynette is not
somebody
a
else
board
speak
member.
first, and you can, and then Lynette, you can speak if you choose. I'm sorry, I jumped the gun here.
Can I also nominate Mark to speak?
Yeah, Mark, you're on the hook, you speak.
Well, I've given my opinion on essentially point number 4. The only other concern in particular that I had on the proposal, or I guess, I'm sorry, we're talking about Candy's
We're
proposal.
talking about
I'm sorry.
my motion.
Where there's a will, there's a way, is all I can say. We created LCLC out of nothing. The LCLC, for the audience's edification, is 11 of the libraries in the Allentown District, which is Lehigh and Carbon counties, 11 of the libraries formed a voluntary system with a small s called the Lehigh Carbon Library Cooperative that has a card that shares the same card, shares the same circulation and lending policies and procedures, and works together essentially like a system without a system board, without county funding and such. So, you know, we did that. You can be creative in, I think being creative in forming partnerships. There's 4 counties up in the Erie area. Those counties, and I think there are 4 different districts, are working together in much more, a close way up there than, much closer than you would think with that kind of library structure. So it's doable, but like Candy said, devil's in the details, and you really have to figure out if there is any funding mechanism that can work for the library.
So, in other words, we already have a version of what Candy is talking about. It's just with a different group. And it's within a group that meets all the various requirements for county lines and the group organization and all
District
that.
lines, yes.
Yeah.
We're already working together as a district.
Right. So if we already have that, Candy's proposal is, what's in it for us? We already got one of these.
Can we be a stronger unit together? I think about a lot of the things that we talked about in our strategic planning. You know, Lynette served the library for over 30 years at this point. Lynette does not have a master's in library science. When Lynette decides that she wants to retire, I have to replace her with someone with a library science degree. That's gonna cost me more money. I also think about some of the operational costs that hit the library that might be able to be spread across the 2 buildings. I think it's worth exploring. I'm not saying it'll work. We haven't done nearly enough investigation to know if it would work. But I would feel better about a conversation between the 2 parties to see if it's something that would be mutually beneficial, not more beneficial to Hellertown or more beneficial to us. If we can't come to something that would make sense for our funding partners as well, it's not gonna work. But we wouldn't know that until we spent some time there. And I didn't want to expend our resources or Lynette's resources, anybody's resources, unless there's board agreement that it's something that we should pursue. Because to Bruce's point, we spent a lot of effort on this, and I don't want to spend effort on things that aren't gonna go anywhere.
And I think, if I remember correctly, it took about 3 years to create LCLC.
Mark, what was the time frame on that?
2 years, I think. Yeah, a lot of that had to, same issues actually that would apply to Hellertown, getting everybody on the same computer system and hammering out all of the details.
But they are not currently on Spark, so that would be a lift.
Yeah.
Is there grant money available, Mark?
I'm not even positive that the organization is called PALES is the one that runs, the nonprofit that runs the Spark system. They may even do the migration for free, but then there's like a $2,000 annual fee.
It's just one of the many details we have to think about. Any other conversation on the motion?
I'm all for libraries helping other libraries. I think the libraries working in partnership is a great idea and a great thing, and it's worth exploring. I don't know that we want to. This does not include accepting Lower Saucon's proposal right now.
No, this would be to explore otherwise.
I just don't know why this is, like, what does it have to do with what we're talking about right now with the proposal from Lower Saucon?
It's an alternative. It's an alternative that we could propose back to Lower Saucon, a cooperative system where they would make a payment that still would probably be more than what they've offered us, but it would allow us to hopefully gain a little better, what I want to use. Maybe we could be more effective financially, so that I don't have to ask for this much, maybe in combination, that everybody might get a little bit of relief. I mean, it's something that we've heard from some of our funding partners too. You know, they're putting a lot of money into, Upper Saucon Township's been a great partner for the library. They put a lot of money into the library. is there a way that we can still provide good quality services at a price point that doesn't hit a taxpayer? It's a thought. Just trying to think creatively.
No, I understand that, but I just don't understand how it helps Hal at all if a co-op.
Shared
Well,
services?
Yeah, so if we, so let's think of it this way.
So
So,
we're gonna take the money from Southern Lehigh Public Library and fund Hal.
yeah, we would put our money together. That would be a way where we could put our funds together to be one system, a capital S system, not a little s system.
So your thought is that we take this or something like this, add it to what we got now, and form some co-op with Hellertown Library.
It's a possibility.
I don't see how that could work, especially with the school district being our second highest funding partner, and Saucon Valley not providing, Saucon Valley School District not providing anything to Hal. They've only had two funding partners, correct? Borough and.
That could be part of the, that's a very great point, Vicky. It's a very good point.
Yeah.
Something we have to work through.
I just don't see it.
And for this to work, Lower Saucon would have to fully fund Hellertown Area Library.
They'd have to make a full fund into something, whether it would be to Hal or to a different system. You know, I've thought of the idea, we're gonna have Saucon Creek Library, you know, Saucon Creek YMCA next door.
Right.
Could it be a Saucon Creek Library system where, you know, we share funds like they do in other places? Again, I'm not saying it'll work.
Yeah, I think the sharing of services, but not the sharing of funds. I don't see how we take money, if we're talking about service areas and joining forces, how do we take?
That's what the committee would have to explore.
Okay, I'm just.
It might be a short conversation.
It might be, because I don't think our funding partners are gonna be like, yeah, let's give our money to Hal.
Well, I mean, but Mr. Treadwell said that he was not, the Lower Saucon Township was not opposed to including other libraries and municipalities, as long as all the funding partners consent. Yes, it is possible we could. Okay, do we have any other comment on the proposal?
Yeah,
Yes, John?
I'm gonna drag this out a little.
That's okay.
I got a question or two for Mark. Okay, we're part of the Lehigh Carbon Counties thing. What exists on the other side of the Northampton Lehigh County line for Hellertown? Do they have a co-op sort of arrangement like that?
No, they do not. They're part of the Bethlehem district, which is actually only 4 libraries total. And they have some district coordination, but that's it.
Okay, so they have 4 libraries that work together, much the way we have, how many?
No, not
No,
really.
It's much looser,
It's looser.
much looser arrangement,
Okay.
mandated by the state. They get a separate pot of money called district funds that they have to coordinate to spend. That's essentially that's how much they coordinate.
But if they chose to coordinate more, like we do, they could.
They could.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm being influenced by everybody.
I mean, I bring it up because, again, we talk about fiduciary responsibility to the library. We talk a lot from a strategic planning perspective that we're trying to do a whole lot of stuff with a lot of with not nearly enough funding. Is there a way we can partner together to save costs to make us more effective? That's why I bring it up. I also think that it also could address some of the fairness issues we've talked about around ensuring that both libraries remain solvent, happy, funded, and patrons going where they would like to go. So it's, again, a creative opportunity.
Do we have any idea of what, I'm sure Hellertown Library and Ken and his board aren't just sitting over at Hellertown watching the world go by. Have they reached out to, not us, but other places for funding, or they gone to the school district, or, you know, do we have any idea what they're doing? They gotta have some kind of plan. This has been going on for over a year.
Mark, do we?
I'm not aware of it.
I mean,
So
I know
they're
that
just
what we
sitting
see,
over
they're
there.
doing a lot of fundraising, that we see, there's a lot of fundraising, some
Yeah,
libraries,
that's
some.
That's not gonna raise a lot.
And they got, well, they used some COVID funds, I think Hellertown gave them some COVID funds to try and help them, but again, it's gonna become a solvency issue for them at some point.
Yeah, and I guess I can't believe they're smart people over there, they can't be just sitting there waiting for the plug to come out of the wall, and
Right, well,
it's gonna get closed.
But
we don't know what they're doing, and I don't think we should speculate.
And Hellertown said they were open to this conversation, if this was something that we wanted to pursue. Hellertown Area Library said that they would be willing to bring it to their board for conversation, to see if they want to join us.
Is this your board or your staff that you're talking?
We spoke to Ken Solt and to Noel Kramer, so their executive director and their board president. Obviously, none of us can said what they would do with it, but they said it was something they were willing to discuss. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all want strong libraries in our communities, and if this is a way to provide us strong libraries, it's something that I think we should consider.
Does LCLC library share funding at all?
No.
No, this would be different. It's a little S cooperative system, not a big S. Okay, I'm gonna call for the call for the vote. I'm gonna start with Bruce.
You wanna read the question again?
So I'm gonna reread the motion, thank you, Kathy. To set up an ad hoc committee to explore a cooperative agreement with Hellertown Area Library to include 2 SLPL board members, Lynette and Mark. Bruce?
No.
John?
No.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
Kat?
Yes.
Vicky?
No.
Motion fails.
So this is another half hour, we'll get back on that.
Stop your whining.
Bruce, at the end of the day, Bruce, I'm gonna stop us here, guys. At the end of the day, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our library. I think that Joe has laid that out very clearly. I do not think that exploring an option that meets that goal is an unreasonable use of our time, okay?
Well, that's your opinion, and I state mine, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good thought experiment, but I think.
So,
the
do we have
negatives are
do we have another motion on this proposal? What, anyone can make a motion?
I make a motion that we reject the Lower Saucon proposal. Just from our discussions, it doesn't sound feasible or fiduciary, can't pronounce that word. Responsible.
I can write it.
Yeah. So the motion is to reject the proposal.
Motion to reject the proposal, just sheer, what the heck.
But no counter.
No counter. We've spent a year and a half on this, and we've already sent our, what we thought was our final proposal last month.
I think this is one more thing.
The $37.50? That was your final proposal?
That
I
was
thought it
what
was
we
a-
were
I thought it was a
legally,
temporary.
that is what we were legally and able to offer Lower Saucon residents.
And they didn't even vote on it.
And
Well,
we
they declined it at the April 4th meeting.
Yeah,
They
So,
voted
but
on it.
anyway, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we have conversation on the motion?
And this is the motion to reject proposal?
Correct.
We've been discussing it, so it's kind of.
Yes.
Yeah,
What we said.
I'm okay with calling the question.
So I guess my only comment here would be a full no leaves us in maybe an odd place. So if we just say no with no counter, A, we know we have funding partners who have a lot of interest in us doing this. And B, I think that we just don't know what's gonna happen. Again, it's a motion, I'm just saying that
It's their final proposal. They said that they're not gonna send another one, it says so in the letter.
I do not believe it said this was best and final.
It does.
Where does this
Yeah.
Well, if we look in the last paragraph, it basically says again, let us know or you go elsewhere.
Yeah, I think you were open.
Plus, they also said it in their April 4th meeting.
Yeah, but that's, I did not see that this was a
They
best and
want a
final.
response by the 4th.
They want a response.
Right, in the event of this response is not received, they will deem it as rejected. That's what they want a response by the fourth. Sorry.
It does say it somewhere.
There was a comment in the meeting about a best and final. To my knowledge, based on this reading, it is not in the letter. Joe, do you say otherwise?
I would agree, I don't think this is final, I think it would require a counter proposal in order to continue negotiations. But I would, even when someone says it's their final offer, you can always give your own offer in response.
I agree with your reading.
Is there any other comment on the motion?
If we don't respond, we just run out the clock on them. There's some attractiveness to that.
I mean, we have some buffer in our savings accounts if some of our funding partners do decide, as the school board brought up, that we do have some savings, which would hurt if we needed to dip into them. If some of our funding partners do pull out, I think it would be socially irresponsible of them to do so, and it would hurt the library extensively if they did decide to do that. But we might be able to weather the storm for a little while.
Not too long.
You know.
When you look at just operational costs, we have less than a year of operational costs in the bank. So we would weather very long depending on who pulled out. So, and it's a risk.
I know.
That's a big risk.
Gambling on the fact that we rely on our community partners and we hope that they rely on us for providing services to their residents.
I mean, I think, Joe, you brought that up as one of the things to think about is how do we make sure that we ensure quality services across our group, so we have to keep that in mind.
I think you want to keep in mind the municipalities you presently serve also, as well as any municipalities you might serve in the future, and maintaining those services. And I like the term, the vision of an ideal community library, the board's vision.
I would propose that if any of our funding partners have any better ideas of what we can offer Lower Saucon, please make a proposal to us, because we haven't seen any written ideas from them either.
Pretty good, yeah.
Okay,
Well,
well,
because all we've heard for this year and a half is, hey, take it. And we say, hey, look
Yes,
at it.
yeah.
Look at the details, please.
So some kind of proposal that actually follows state guidelines and our LCLC agreement and everything else that we're worried about, such as the $61,515 deficits to our budget. What is their proposal that whatever our, if they do pull out, what is their resolution for how to work with Lower Saucon? Like, what is your idea? Because that's something that we've not heard. We've heard questions and we've heard statements such as you can give access PA to anyone who gives you money. We've heard all kinds of wild statements, but we've not heard a specific follows the rules proposal from Lower Saucon or from our funding partners. So I respect them highly and all of the support that they've given the library over the years. It's been amazing that they wanted us in their community and that we've been able to serve their community for 60 years. This is our 60th anniversary of working with the Southern Lehigh community. And I really, really, really hope that we can continue that way into the future, because this is a great community and I'm very, very happy to be on the board and serving it. But I would like to see someone make an actual logical proposal for if they want to work with Lower Saucon, please give us a proposal that we can actually work with.
That's financially feasible.
That's financially feasible and that follows the state law and all of the other guidelines that OCL gives us and that LCLC gives us.
the danger point of that, Kat, is I think that probably the people who know the most about how that should work in the real world are Mark and Joe, and then
I
some
know,
of us.
and they've never asked us questions,
Yeah,
like
so-
specific questions, like, are you allowed to do this? No? Okay, what else can we do? And even in that Lower Saucon April 4th meeting, one of the board council members mentioned that they didn't have access to a library to ask these questions, and I would argue that they could ask any library, or Mark, the district consultant, or the Bethlehem Library district consultants, and they could have asked all of these questions I mean, heck, there's even a 24/7 chat line for the Pennsylvania State Library that they could submit any question to and you get a response back. It's really not that hard to ask a librarian a question. They love answering questions and reference materials.
So to be fair, I think some of these questions come down to legal
Details,
concerns that have not ever been litigated.
Right.
So it's really tough. I mean, we ask Joe these questions and we ask Mark these questions and we take best knowledge based off of how we see it written. And that any choice we make has a risk of litigation, so.
No, I see the risks. I just really hope that our funding partners know that we have spent almost a year plus now on, or over a year plus now on this issue, and we have done the due diligence. I mean, look at this. And we've had multiple discussions, and we've just, I mean, we've spent, what, almost 2 hours discussing Lower Saucon's problems instead of our strategic plan or our fundraising efforts or our own library. And I'd really like to get back to discussing our own library. So I still stand with my motion that we reject the proposal.
Do we have any other comments on,
Maybe with the addition that we asked for? No.
you have to make a
Okay.
motion to amend your motion.
Does anyone want to make amendment to my motion? Am I allowed to do that?
You can make an amendment to your motion.
Oh, I can make amendment, but nobody else.
Anybody could request an amendment, we just need a second.
The second, the person, your second can agree to your amendment.
Oh, okay.
That's what we're doing. Motion that we reject the proposal, and then you said something about funding partners, they might have suggestions.
That we reject the proposal and ask for proposals from our funding partners for additional ideas, I don't know, additional. But our funding partners, not Lower Saucon, because we've heard Lower Saucon's proposal.
Is there a second?
Can
We have,
I make a suggestion? Why don't we have two motions? Why don't we take her original motion?
I like that idea, yeah.
To talk to
I
our.
like
you want to retract?
Yeah, retract
Okay,
mine.
so she's retracting her amendment. Okay, so the current motion is to reject the proposal, which we have a second. Are we ready to hold vote? Okay, Bruce? And to be clear, so a yes is to reject, a no is to accept.
Okay, we're just gonna ask for that. Yes.
Reject.
Yes. I'm a no.
That's interesting.
I think there's a different motion that we should be considering, so I'm gonna vote no.
Fine, bring it back, I'll move it.
So Kathy, I'm a yes.
No. Okay, motion fails. We do not have 4 voting members who voted yes to that motion.
Now,
Kathy, make your motion. I don't hear what you have to say. I'm gonna take Candy. You're Candy.
So my motion would be, how do I want to word this? I motion that the Southern Lehigh Public Library and invite Lower Saucon Township to have a cooperative conversation around the proposal to see if we can negotiate terms that might be more acceptable to the Southern Lehigh Public Library. Do you need to restate that,
Yeah.
Kathy? Invite Lower Saucon Township to a cooperative conversation.
Who are we inviting?
I would
Their
send
entire-
that
their
to
entire
Shredwell,
council?
just like we did last time.
I mean, we had dozens of these meetings.
I'm making the motion.
This will be invite SLT to a cooperative conversation.
To see if a more equitable proposal could be negotiated. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second the discussion.
Yeah, second doesn't mean you're gonna vote yes, so it just means that you wanna open conversation. Okay, so we have a second on the motion, so we can have now conversation on the motion.
I think we just counter today. I mean, I don't know why we even, that's part of the negotiation is countering their offer. If we don't want it the as is, then we propose, well, what do you want? And then we send it to them and then they respond. It's negotiating. To have a conversation, it's just kicking the can down the road. This is never gonna end. This is never gonna end. It's either gonna end with an agreement or it's gonna end with a no.
End it with
Well,
a
I
no
mean,
and
to
see
be
what their
fair-
action is. You know what, I'm standing here and I'm listening to this.
They're not
Please,
recognized.
Please. I mean, Vicki, that's a good point. To negotiate, we would have to come up with things the board generally has a comfort level in, just like we did before.
I kind of see it as, we've been discussing it for a year and a half. They've had every opportunity to discuss it with us for a year and a half. This is what they've come up with after a year and a half. I don't see it working.
I don't see it either, and I've been, I can't tell you how many meetings I was involved with some members of their counselors, and some of our funders and stuff like that, and they just go no place. They sit there and, or they don't show up for the meetings, we've invited them. I think we're just wasting our time trying to have a little love fest with them again, because it doesn't work.
We made an offer in good faith. I should talk to my sales manager and see if that offer is still valid.
Can we just send them the same proposal again?
That,
They
they've
can,
already.
they can beg for it.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Do we have other comment on the proposal, on the motion?
I actually like Kat's idea. The reason that we wanted to do month to month is we wanted to help serve their residents if they wanted to come here. We want to get an idea if their residents like our library. We just want a little money from them. We don't want them on the board.
A non-voting member.
A non-voting member on the board.
Okay, so is there more discussion on the actual motion?
I forget what the
So the motion was to invite Lower Saucon Township to a cooperative conversation to see if a more equitable proposal could be made. My theory would be that maybe we can see what else is on the table. Okay, I don't hear any more comments, so we're gonna call this for a vote. Bruce?
Can I hear the motion again?
Yes, to invite Lower Saucon Township to a cooperative conversation to see if a more equitable proposal could be negotiated. Bruce?
No.
John?
No.
I'm a yes. Kathy?
I'll say yes.
Kat?
No.
Vicki?
No.
Okay, motion fails. Do we have a motion, another motion that we think we might be able to pass tonight? Because if not, Joe, what happens? It just sits?
I can send a rejection to a letter to Lower Saucon Township, or we can just let it phase out pursuant to the last paragraph of the letter.
Is there an alternate motion that the board could make tonight? There
Yes,
might
we
be a
counter. We counter.
Do you have a motion, Vicki, for that counter?
Sending back the same proposal we sent them before?
Well, this is
No.
Vicki's proposal. This is Vicki's motion, so.
I don't think that's gonna go anywhere, obviously, because they didn't take it the first time.
Vicki, do
I
you
mean,
have?
I don't have the history that you all do. I'm looking at this from my perspective. And I think there's an opportunity here for Southern Lehigh and its residents to expand and not have increased taxes. So I would propose that we counter with, we do the per capita, if that's what everybody's thinking, at the 370 or the 1197, and we go up back with that per year. So it's either 131, 670, or 150 at the other per capita of $13.70.
And 1370 is equal to what?
150,700.
They have 160 in the library budget.
That's right, they do. Or we, as is, but I think we should at least respond to this letter. I mean, we're just going back and forth, never ending. And I've been here 2 months. So,
Sometimes the non-response may be more
So-
powerful.
Let's clarify the proposal. So is your proposal to counter at 1370 per capita? Is that your
or
proposal?
the 1197, which is what their Upper Saucon Township does.
Where did those numbers come from?
It's from the sheet. Upper Saucon Township itself pays 1197. As a whole, each township resident has about $13.70 that goes in to the library when you combine all the funding together. Which number would you like to propose?
1370.
Is that your motion, John?
I think Bruce's.
Oh, Bruce? Actually, with the school funding, it would be 1505.
No, it's, the 1370 is overall, yeah. Okay, is the 1370 your motion?
I don't know, I'm thinking.
Okay.
You could split the baby
No,
and
I don't-
make it in between.
No, I don't think I don't think the school district should be a part of it, so, no.
So it's 1197?
1197.
Okay, so 1197.
So that's 131,670.
So if we're making.
Wait, that's the motion.
This is impossible.
I know, I'm gonna ask her if
Okay.
she can add something to her mission.
Okay.
And that is to get rid of that, that part that says that if one party gets out of it, the escape
The
clause.
penalty.
Yes, I would get rid of that.
But we already, I don't understand
10
how,
year, you can have
it's a
10-year
10-year.
Yeah, you can have a 10-year agreement,
Yeah.
for sure. It's just a money penalty. Do you understand what's going on? Because
I understand what's going on, Kathy, I'm just saying it doesn't show anything about a penalty in here, it doesn't give it, it doesn't give
oh, it's
a.
not listed on
It
there.
doesn't
give
say what it is.
doesn't
It
say
says
what
it-
it is.
Oh,
It's
they
a
took
agreed
that.
upon.
It'll contain financial penalties
Right,
brought
it
by all
doesn't say
parties,
what
so
it
we
is.
could
That's
negotiate whatever that
negotiable.
is.
Okay.
Okay. So your motion is to counter at 1197. Okay, I'm gonna make a second to that so that we can discuss that. Okay, so that motion to send a counter proposal of 1197 is on the table for discussion.
That's for, I guess, part 3, right? Part 3 only?
Between 2 and 3, I guess we just figure it out. If you're gonna pay me 1197 a year.
Is this still gonna include the 250,000?
Well, that's what I was just going to talk about.
Was that part of the motion?
Well, so her motion was an 1197 per capita.
Part 3 on the letter.
Okay. So you're
So-
saying,
Let's
So
go
what
piece
happens-
by
So we're
piece.
doing a little adjustment to Treadwell's proposal, is that what we're talking
Yes.
about?
We can continue with the little proposals, but let's start with number 3.
Before you get to that, can I ask what the impact will be on the budget? Can
yeah,
we
I'm
get
doing
a
the math
very
right
quick
now.
estimate for the board's information?
So it would be 131.
And are you suggesting that it be a fixed rate for them, but an unfixed rate for all of our other funding partners?
It goes up. I like it.
Well, that could be a caveat that we say, with,
It's not a
the
fixed rate.
taxes, I mean, it's a millage thing, right? Or is it just,
It's all-
it's not, it's just.
We don't charge that way. It would just be, normally what happens, Vicki, is every year we go to each of our funding partners
Ask
and we
for
normally
more.
ask. And last year we didn't ask for an increase, we held steady.
Mhm.
And the year before, I think we asked for almost 10%. 'cause
Well,
we
maybe
were
that's
working
where
on
the 250 comes in.
helps ameliorate it. access terms.
I'm just trying to work this problem.
No,
I'm not
understood.
here with all the answers, I'm just trying to move things along a little bit.
I cannot in good conscience support anything that would make it harder for Lower Saucon Township residents to have the relationship they used to have with our town area library. Treadwell's thing is so full of poison pills to prevent that, that I'm not sure we want to use it as a starting point.
Our proposal was what we could, for the most part, legally provide services, like limited services is what our hands are tied to for the state and LCLC agreements.
Until the fall when we can apply.
But that's all the way in October, and they were asking for services by June 1st.
I think I would advise that we phrase, if there's any type of negotiations, we phrase the agreement that we would provide them so long as we can provide them. And we work it out that way.
Okay.
So based on the 1197. No, wait, I have to read its math, because you're still including the 250,000 up front. Give me a second, I gotta do this. So if we get 250 up front and then 131,670 times 10. Okay, so that would make, so the 250 plus 131,670 times 10 years. Is $1,566,700 versus their initial proposal of $1 million. So if I divide that by 10 years and 7 months, that's an annual contribution of $148,035.11. I'm doing lots of math. Appreciate your patience. That proposal, if we keep the 250 plus they go to the per capita rate of Upper Saucon Township, would get us to negative 8,000 in year one. To Kat's point, we have to think about inflationary pieces too, but so that's the consideration. I guess my biggest concern is that if we counter just on cost, but we still have all these other pieces, like having to provide access PA privileges starting June 1st, I'm afraid that we're gonna end up in a pretty hefty litigation. Not just that we might end up in litigation, but that the other LC libraries could end up in litigation, which would affect district funds. And that number could end up in a pretty nasty place really quickly. Because it wouldn't just necessarily be, we could have a lot of people who could, in theory, be suing us for providing access that.
What I mentioned before is proposing if we were to enter into any type of agreement that we would provide these services, provide that we could provide those services, we're capable of providing them, and then work out some type of language working around that. So that if we could provide it immediately, we would provide it immediately, but if we have to wait, then we'd be able to wait. I agree, I don't think we can agree with that specific language as it has been proposed.
And also entering it into a 10-year agreement with all of this uncertainty is not something I'm comfortable with.
And if we go forward with the proposal, this counter proposal, what are we saying? We're gonna take the money, but Town Library, you're on your own, or all I've heard, all mine is, you wanna support small libraries in both areas. But now we're gonna take the money and you're on your own. So we've gone from, wanna get together and talk to them and meet with them to, now we're gonna do this. I have a hard
Which
time.
is why I proposed the motion that I did that.
Yeah.
Well, look at the map, that's not our job. The proposal that Lower Saucon rejected is geographically ridiculous. But it did provide a lifeboat of services at pain of an extra 40 or 50 minutes of driving for each library customer from Lower Saucon Township. And I could live with that lifeboat, but and that lifeboat proposal was designed so that the day it was no longer needed, we could discontinue it. And I still think that's where we should be. I think Lower Saucon ought to warm up to that idea.
Do we have other comment on the motion?
I'd like to know how the stalling on the bylaw changes would be affected, or the bylaws would be affected at all. And I'm not clear, is the proposal that per capita rate be across all the municipalities, or just Upper Saucon and Lower Saucon, which would leave Coopersburg and Lower Milford still without a voting member on our board?
And zero chance of ever achieving that with Lower Saucon, or Lower Milford's and Coopersburg's budgets.
I would suspect that would be the case.
Have they ever been compliant with the bylaws?
No,
Never,
never.
since conception. And they're just not being enforced, right, the bylaws?
Not in 60
Correct.
years?
And I think Mark can speak to that happening across the state
That's,
frequently.
yeah, that's just one situation, one of the rules where, as an office as Commonwealth Libraries, what's the word I'm looking for? Their response has been as long as all local members agree to a certain arrangement, they're willing to look the other way. And it's not only happened here, it's happening all over the state as we speak. It has happened, and obviously it has been the de facto accepted way of doing business here at Southern Lehigh up until this year.
Would adding up Lower Saucon's $11.97 per capita also knock out the school board's 15%? That's, I think, is what we discussed at one of the
Let me look.
meetings.
Sorry, I gotta do some more math.
I mean, if they would say.
Because Lower Saucon would increase our budget, so therefore the 15% gets harder to achieve.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Sorry, I gotta do some more math, guys.
So
It's a puzzle box.
While Kenny's doing the math, I would advise that it's a very tricky hole you go down if you don't follow your bylaws as an organization. There's a lot of ramifications, I'm not going to go into all of them, legally speaking, in terms of especially enforceability of contracts. And the Office of Commonwealth Libraries aren't the only ones who can seek to enforce bylaws. There could be other parties. So I would just point that out.
So if Coopersburg and Lower Milford got kicked out by voting, then I can't imagine that they would say, well, we're gonna keep funding it. So if they can't vote, why
I
fund
can't
it?
see Lower Milford doing.
I would also point out that one of the issues is that we can't revise the bylaws without approval by Upper Saucon. So that's not something that we can change on our own.
So my quick math shows that the school board, this is if Coopersburg and Lower Milford and Upper Saucon Township kept their funding where they did, they'd be at 15.3%. So they would, depending on how things fluctuate and depending on how the math works, because I don't know if it's 15, that first year in 3 they'd get kicked out if we took the 250.
So, yes, the school board would lose.
At least in the first year, and then the second year it would even back out, that they would get those.
They lose the first year even keeping where it was at 75. Did you do the math for that?
For
the school board.
If we took the 75, no, it should be
No,
fine, I
they're-
can do the math.
If we
They're
took
at
the 250 plus
71
75.
for
The first year they'd be kicked out.
Yeah, the first year, yeah, the first year.
So then the board will need Lower Saucon and Upper Saucon, and new funding by Lower Milford probably, or Coopersburg. And if the school board doesn't fund, then the library could kick out Lower Milford and Coopersburg because they're not being funded.
In theory, yes, but that's the destruction of the vision that we have built for the Southern Lehigh Public Library by, what, 13 moms, right?
Right, and we have two communities that are split instead of just one.
Right.
Great.
Which is why our initial proposal to Lower Saucon Township was what we could offer.
Is there more comment on the motion to change section 3 to a per capita of 1197?
So in other words, we would be voting for a slight modification of Treadwell's letter.
Correct. So all other points in the letter would stay the same.
I'm not saying that, I'm just saying I wanted to talk about section 3. Let's go section by section. I'm not saying let's keep everything else. Like, I don't even know what number 5, like, do we go back and say, appoint board members to the board? Well, how many do they want? Well, could we give them 1? Like, all these things are up for negotiating.
That was your Joe, can you provide some guidance here?
I will point out, the number of board members is kind of strange because it's actually by agreement through the municipalities. So that's not something that we would exactly have control over, and according to our bylaws, it's proportional to, and it is proportional to the total amount of funding, so that's gonna be affiliated with our bylaws, so that's not really something that we have a lot of control over.
Well, it's quickly becoming apparent that we cannot make a contract out of this. This letter is vague in ways you guys have been pointing out. There are things about it we don't like. I don't think any of us has ever drafted a contract by sitting in a table quite like this in front of 26, an audience of 26. And we love you, but I don't think well wordsmithing in a place like this. So, this was not designed to reach an agreement. Let us not be naive and think that it was. This was designed to be a pain in the ass.
Great success. Is there more comment on the motion? Which was what? To,
Yeah, we asked 1197 for that.
so that would adjust number 3. But it sounds like Vicky's proposal is not to just send it as is, but to get board agreement on a change to number 3, correct?
I have another proposal. So instead of saying, yeah, I know,
We've already got a motion.
I'm commenting. I'm not changing it, I'm just commenting. How about we just say, for something like that, that they pay proportionally the same as Upper Saucon Township per capita going, now and going forward. So if there is more coming in future, they pay that same
So you're
amount.
saying that we would,
Tie them to.
so if the per capita for Upper Saucon Township increases, that Lower Saucon Township would have to
I
agree.
see. Right, they tie together.
How would you say that?
Well, so I think you were making that just as a comment, as we're thinking
Yeah.
through the proposal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something to think about. I mean, I think generally we do per capita based off of the last census, and that gets taken every 10 years. So when we think about that, I think, so we have to think about, would we?
But the contribution would increase.
Yeah, we could also do the, if Upper Saucon Township increases their contribution by 5%, but we expect the same 5% from Lower Saucon. That's also something that could be under consideration. So starting at the same point.
What are you gonna do if Upper Saucon says, oh, we got more money coming in from Lower Saucon now, so we're gonna drop it to, instead of $11.97, we're gonna drop it to $9.97.
Yeah, it goes both
We're trying to
ways.
negotiate a contract in a board meeting, which is crazy.
Well, it's a motion. I appreciate Vicki making a motion. Are we ready to call that question? Any other? Okay, so again, the motion is to adjust number 3 to $11.96 per capita instead, which is a value of $131,670 instead of the 75,000.
So is that, it's not this?
11.97, so the number is $131,670. That's how we figured it.
75.
Okay, Bruce?
So, yes says we're gonna do it, no says,
Yes, since we would adjust that piece of the proposal. I think Vicki's intent is that we would discuss other pieces.
no.
Okay, so Bruce is a no. John?
John's a no.
Candy's a no.
Kathy's a no.
No.
Vicki? Vicki, who's her vote?
Yes.
Vicki's a yes. Okay.
Try something else.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna make a different motion.
I propose we take a 10-minute break for bathrooms.
Ooh, I like that.
Should we do that, Joe? Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute break. We'll be back in the room by 8:34.
Don't deliberate on it.
Yeah, no.
Right, that's an advantage of that.
I'm discussing it all the time.
How you doing?
That's less than a year, right?
I had,
How's he doing? I realize I'm confusing tracks and everything. I shouldn't say. Bottom line, I can't say it. Can't say it.
Order at 8:35. Appreciate everyone sticking here. This is a long conversation, but part of our responsibility. Okay.
Go back to HVAC systems.
Well, I think we're gonna get there. So I'm gonna make a motion.
Okay.
I'm gonna make a motion that we set up a separate special meeting to discuss this at the earliest available time. I think at this point, there's been a lot of conversation. I think that I've had a lot of thought, and a lot of people have had thought, but I think we need to set a special meeting to discuss this separately. I think that might be an opportunity to reset, because I don't think we're getting anywhere here tonight. I think everybody's pretty burnt out. Do I have a second?
Can I make an amendment?
What's your amendment?
That before we set up a special meeting to discuss it, we ask all of our funding partners for proposals on how they see a partnership with Lower Saucon Township working in accordance with PA state law and our LCLC agreement.
Okay, so I will make an amended motion. I will make a motion that we set a special meeting to discuss this at a date and time that is amenable to all parties. And before that special meeting, that we will send correspondence to our funders explaining the difficulties that we have in reaching a decision and requesting their feedback. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a second. Let's discuss that motion.
I think one of the problems I see with that is that there's so much involved in libraries that
Archaic.
yeah, and it's really hard to explain all the ins and outs to our funding partners. I mean, they're thinking you check out books and that's it. The OCL rules, the LCLC agreement, why it's hard across the county lines. Well,
I think the meeting will be fruitless unless a substantial representation from each of the funding partners were also there. And they would see firsthand some of the things you just mentioned. And no, we're not just saying no to a $250,000 gift. There's, we actually looked into this.
That letter would explain those things and ask for their feedback. Hopefully some of them will join us, some of them are here today. I wanna make sure that we consider this fully. And I think we're stuck tonight, and I think that we might need some time to think through what we're doing.
As part of your motion, I would suggest that, because May 4th is right around the corner. So that we maybe ask Joe to communicate with Link that we're not gonna get back to him by May 4th, and this is what we do. Just so we don't think we're gonna have it.
we did reject their proposal. Oh,
We've not officially made a motion on the proposal that has passed. So we need
Oh,
four voting members
correct,
to
yeah.
do that. So if we don't, by then, I don't know that, does that need to be part of the motion, Joe, or is that just a phone call you can make?
That's something I can do I don't think we need it to be as part of the motion, I think it's a byproduct of the motion.
Okay.
I just don't see us having a special meeting and talking with about Lower Saucon issues without our funding partners. Because we need their feedback and we need logical feedback with informed feedback. And we can get all the pressure we want to take the $250,000 plus whatever Lower Saucon wants to throw in the hat. But our hands are kind of tied with what we're allowed to do.
Kat, are you proposing an amendment to my motion?
No, it was still a special meeting to discuss it separately, but ask our funding partners.
Originally, so we would ask for the feedback we want.
Yeah, I want logical, sensible feedback. I don't want pressure to take the money. I want, how do we get around all of the puzzle pieces that their agreement and accepting Lower Saucon Township into our service area would create.
Do we want him to come to the meeting prepared for that, or to communicate that to us prior to, and attend the meeting as well?
Ideally, both.
Both. Meeting will be a failure if they're not in the room.
Right.
And if they're ill-prepared, it may well still be a failure.
so are you talking about boards and boards and boards and boards?
I
Yep.
mean, this occurred earlier, right, Bruce? You guys sat in a room with the funding partners very early in this process to discuss,
Yes.
so there is precedent for
There was
that
representatives
meeting.
But
to,
now we've had a year's worth of education.
do you want to officially make a motion to amend the motion, Kat?
Oh, I thought I did.
Okay, so you're amending the motion to A, request feedback in advance, and B, to request the presence at the special meeting.
And
Okay, so I will second that motion, yeah, I didn't hear second that.
So what's the whole motion?
Bruce seconds.
I have to approve
Bruce second.
the amendment first to the motion, right? Or can I just,
She had.
Yes, so you should second it.
I second it.
Do we have to
Bruce
first
already
reject
seconded.
the initial Lower Saucon proposal before we do this?
Bruce seconded.
Bruce did, okay.
Bruce seconded, so if you want to amend it, then Bruce has to agree to the amendment.
So can you read that?
I think.
It's 20 minutes to 9, I'm getting tired.
We set up a separate special meeting to discuss Lower Saucon Township at a date and time that it's amenable to all parties. Before that, we talked to our funding partners for their feedback and their presence at the meeting.
Yeah, okay,
They
I'll
were
Constructive feedback.
Okay, Bruce has agreed to that amendment. Do we have more conversation on that motion?
Would this be scheduled at a time and be a public meeting and scheduled at a time?
It would have to be if we're all gonna be here, so yes. We may need to find a separate forum for that meeting. I'm sure we could work with our funding partners to find a larger forum. Maybe Upper Saucon Township might be willing to host, as we can ask.
I'm thinking in June.
We'll see when we can do
June
it.
Mhm.
I mean, because we've got to get everybody together if we're gonna do that, so.
On the 17th.
Okay. Do I have any more conversation on that motion?
What happens if none of the funding partners show up? Or an insufficient number of them show up? I mean, they wield power over us by not showing up.
Then we reject Lower Saucon's proposal.
That's something we could do. I mean, I think we would have to assume in good faith that we've opened the door. Several of the partners have said that this is what they would like to see us do. I think that while there's a lot of trepidation, hesitation, there's at least good faith of having a conversation, so. Okay, I'm gonna call the question on that, so we're gonna read back this motion. Sorry, Kathy, it's a lot of things today. So we're gonna set up a motion to set up a separate special meeting to discuss the Lower Saucon Township proposal at a date and time that is amenable to all parties. Before that meeting, there will be communication to the funding partners for their feedback and requesting their presence at said special meeting. That shall be a public meeting. Bruce?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
Kathy's a yes. Kat?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. So
I agree.
I will work with Lynette, we'll see, we'll get some communication together. Joe, I'm assuming you might be able to help us with that communication. We'll see if we can find a location that would be large enough to house everybody, because I don't think we have room here, and get some dates and times out to the board, and we'll see how expeditiously we can house that meeting.
Are you gonna get like multiple dates?
Yeah, we'll see what's available, and then we'll get that to the board. I really think it's important that, I mean, technically we could do it without one person or two people, but I think it's really important that we're all here to discuss it, it's important now. Okay. Should I take a break? Okay, we're gonna move on to other business. If you would like to exit because of the hour, I'm gonna give us people about 2 minutes. Otherwise, feel free to stay and join us and listen. No, you have to stay.
Join us for Read Between the Lines on October 21st. We're drinking in the library. Do we all get the future meetings? Wine tasting and silent auction. Much drinking. An Uber.
Thank you, Dad. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Interesting.
Thank you, everyone, thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Good luck.
Okay, we're gonna keep moving down the line. Next thing up is fundraising updates. I'm first up with Creative Kids Children's Art Show. We don't have financials yet, we'll probably have financials in the next piece. We have 15 families, is that right? 14 families who came.